So my new big bearded dragon setup, you know that one just there, the big one, yeah, the one I've just built, I've just done a full big video on how to build it step by step and all that sort of stuff. Why isn't it bioactive? I've had so many questions on that. So many people say, well, all of your enclosures are bioactive, and that's why I follow you, to see how to do it bioactive, to do everything. I mean, you've got the big green tree python setup just there, fully bioactive, fully live planted, with him just sat there. I've got the big one just there. I've got royal python down. I've got loads of big morning gecko setup. I've got loads of bioactive setups. And why isn't this one bioactive? Solely, well, there's a number of reasons. Take, for instance, this one. All the plants and the custodians, the clean-up crew, all the critters, the full ecosystem is completely natural to his natural habitat. Everything is absolutely perfect. You see, a reptile, being an ectothermic animal, really thrives off their natural habitat. That every little tiny molecule detail of that natural habitat has some benefit to that specific animal. Granted, there are some stuff in nature which really doesn't do too well for the animals. Just random things, natural disasters, thunderstorms, predators, all that sort of stuff. In captivity, we can keep them away from all that, so that's why they live longer in captivity. This one over here, my big Calyx versicolor. There's a few things in there that are not 100% native to his habitat, but they benefit him. Various things like bromeliads. The plant, the bromelia, doesn't benefit him in his natural habitat. It's not in his natural habitat, but why have I got it in there? Solely because it creates a little cup of water for him, and he does actively go into that bromeliad and start drinking it. Why haven't I done completely naturalistic with this one? There's a couple of varying factors, shall we say, and these are stuff that you can consider when you're thinking about going fully bioactive with your bearded dragon. Now, I can't, in the UK here, go completely how I want to do it in there, solely because I can't get some of the Australian grass species that I want to create. I wanted to create a full-on grassland, scrubland sort of area for him, with the log work that he can climb up to get to the basking area and all that sort of stuff. And I physically can't get those plants here in the UK, and that was heartbreaking. But you might sit there thinking, like we do with our dart frog enclosure or all of our other bioactive enclosures, can't you just substitute it, put something else in there, just put another plant in there, a different style of plant? The thing with a bearded dragon is they're a herbivore. No, they're not. They're an omnivore species, so they'll eat your locusts, your live food, all that sort of stuff, but they also eat plants. I don't want him to potentially eat a plant that I put in there, and then for that to have a toxic effect on his stomach acid. So that's something we really have to consider when it comes to your reptiles. One slight little change within their dietary requirements, one slight little mistake made by you, that could be detrimental to him, and we don't want that. So that's just one of the reasons why I've done that. But then I looked at the substrate, I went down that line. What can I do for substrate? Because in here I've got half sand and soil, not even half, like a third of it's half sand and soil. The rest of it is solid slate, and I don't like it, I'll be honest. I'm not a fan of it at all, but that sort of, it'll do until I come up with a better option. And don't get me wrong, he's thriving in it. He absolutely thrives. I mean, it's 7:30 at night. His lights are about to go off. You might see them actually go off in this video because I'm just doing it in one big stream. He's sat all tucked away behind that plant there, right up in the corner. He's in bed, so to speak. He's sort of winding down. This enclosure has got full UV lighting over the basking spot. I want to explain that again because some people said I'm doing it wrong. In nature, the hottest part, I want to try and convert this into a fully naturalistic, fully bioactive setup eventually, until I've built the knowledge up that I need, and until I can resource the bits and bobs that I want to resource to be able to do it. And I'm not just going to make do, so to speak. I'm not just going to, oh, that'll do. I mean, the whole British Army is held together with that mentality, and it's not the best. So all of his UV is over that top corner, over his basking spot, because in nature, the hottest areas where the most intense UV and infrared actually is on the basking spot, where they go to bask. The hottest areas is where they go to bask, and that's where all the UV is as well. So we're trying to create that aspect of nature and get him used to that aspect of nature before we take it that little one step further. Don't get me wrong, he has got another strip UV light that runs across the back of the enclosure. It's not as strong as what you'd typically have. It's just there as a bit of an ambient UV. I think it's only kicking out 1.2 UVI. The basking spot is where the majority of his UVI actually is. Now that back UV is only on for 4 hours a day through the middle of the day, solely because, again, in nature, they get the higher UV output through the middle of the day. This is set up with a twin T5 luminaire. That's two T5 lamps over his basking spot. They come on at slightly different times. One will come on first thing in the morning, then the other one will come on about half an hour later. That replicates the sunrise on a UV level. So it's like a sunrise. And then sort of, I think it's around about 10 o'clock I've programmed it for. 10 o'clock in the morning, bang, on comes that backlight. Just gives him that little bit more UV as an ambient UV. It doesn't really affect his basking spot or anything like that. It's just something that I like to test around, play around with, that sort of thing, just to see if there is any benefit from doing that. And about 2 o'clock it goes off, and it's just left to his basking spot, UV lamps, and then they go off different times to create the sunset. So it's like a full sun cycle within that enclosure. He's got his full range where he can run around. He's got his different substrates that he can do his different things on. He can dig, he can burrow, he can just do loads of different things, and he's got slate over the basking spot. Why am I not doing a full loose substrate like I have done in the past with him? And again, the more and more I dig into the research on how bearded dragons live in Australia, the more I'm straying away from COVID, the more I'm straying away from a solid loose substrate. Hear me out. Everyone says, well, it's natural to have a loose substrate. Is it though? You look at all the photos from their natural habitat, and it's a solid, compact, sun-baked, clay, sandy sort of soil, and it is really hard. Do you know, like if you go for a walk down to the park and you go for a walk on the grass, that's just not loose grass and stuff, is it? That's really compact and it's solid, and that's my sort of mentality along it. Don't get me wrong, it's really, really dusty, so it's really, really fine. You take 1 grain of sand and chop it into 12 pieces, that's how fine the actual dust is that's out there. So there is a lot of dust. You get a little wind gust and you can see the dust really kick up. And then I'm looking down the line of cleanup crew for him. Now, everyone says, oh, well, we'll just use springtails. They're a hardy species. They'll be able to do all the bioactive sort of stuff in there. No. I want a piece of Australia. Just a nice chop of Australia, 4 foot wide, 2 foot deep, and that's what I want in there. Springtails aren't out there. Isopods aren't out there. You might get some bits and bobs, some sort of slightly higher humidity crustaceans underneath some rocks near some lake or oasis or something like that. But you ain't going to get it naturally in an enclosure. What is their cleanup crew in Australia? Believe it or not, flies. Now, I've heard black soldier fly larvae can do perfectly fine, and then they'll hatch into the flies, and then they eat the flies, which is pretty normal. The flies will eat all the feces and all the stuff lying around, refertilise the soil, which refertilises the plants, does all that sort of stuff, and then he'll eat the flies. That is what I've found out so far, and I don't want that full of flies. It might be good for him, but do I really want to have that in here? Maybe chuck some in as a bit of a food source every now and then, but do I really want to have that full of flies? What made me have that little epiphany, and this is quite a stupid sort of YouTube-y sort of thing. You've heard of the channel, How Ridiculous. They drop stuff off a big stage and it breaks stuff and whatever. They do some pretty epic stuff, to be fair. It's entertainment rather than educational. And they're always doing this. They're in Australia and they're always flicking the flies away, and there's loads of them around. That's what they'd naturally eat in the wild. So what am I going to do? Because like I say, I'm not too happy with the slate. It just looks bare. I'm not too happy that I've not got the plants in there. It just looks bare. There's no like clean air. The joy with plants is they physically clean the air that's inside that enclosure. And he isn't benefiting from that because there is no plants in there at the moment. So as and when I can source some plants, send the plants through a quarantine process, it's just proving extremely tricky. I might start having to go down my unnormal routes and go down to like the specific reptile companies' websites, Bioactive Herbs, Jossish Frogs, all that sort of stuff, and just see what they have. You pay top dollar for them, but we'll see what happens with that in the future. The floor, I want to do like I've done in my leopard gecko's enclosure, where it's still quite hilly and all that sort of stuff. It looks quite sandy, but I don't 100% want it to look quite sandy in there. I want it to look more grasslandy. So I don't know. We'll play around with that. But I'm going to make it not just a flat. I'm going to make it all hilly and stuff like that. And it's going to be a solid substance in there when I've got the knowledge on how to treat that. How can I heat protect it? Because there's a basking spot there. That's the big thing that I'm looking at, and I want to make sure I get it perfect first time. So I'm going to have to do a few test runs, and does this work, does that work, set it all up. And you know what we're like on this channel. We do like to test things. So we're going to be doing a lot of that to do with that. But he needed that enclosure, so that's why I've put it together like that. But that's the reasons why I've not gone bioactive with that enclosure. Might just be something for you guys to consider if you're pushing towards bioactivity or naturalism with your bearded dragon.